Welcome to Touching Soul Stories, where every story leaves a mark on your heart. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and join our growing family of listeners who believe in the power of stories that heal, inspire, and touch the soul. Now, tonight's story begins in the middle of a storm. The rain was pouring down, the streets were empty, and inside an old garage, a man thought he was alone. But fate had other plans. Because sometimes the smallest voices appear in the darkest nights, bringing secrets that can change everything. Stay with me until the very end, because what this little girl whispered will stay with you long after the rain stops.
The rain came down in steady sheets that night, tapping against the cracked window panes of Miller's auto garage. Inside, the smell of grease and old engine oil lingered, mixing with the faint hiss of a space heater that never seemed to warm more than the corner it sat in. Jack Miller leaned against the hood of a rusted pickup, wiping his hands on a rag already soaked in black stains. He should have gone home an hour ago, but home had long since stopped calling to him. These four walls, lined with tools and spare parts, felt more familiar than the silence of his empty house. He was locking up, keys jingling in his rough, calloused hand, when he noticed her. At first, he thought the shadows were playing tricks. A small figure stood beneath the dim glow of the street lamp, her shoulders trembling beneath a thin, patched-up coat. The rain soaked her hair flat against her cheeks, but her eyes, large and round, watched him with unsettling steadiness. Jack's first instinct was to glance away. Town kids sometimes wandered, but this wasn't the part of town where children should be standing in the rain. He cleared his throat. "Hey, you lost or something?" The girl didn't answer right away. She stepped closer, the puddles rippling under her shoes that looked too small for her feet. She couldn't have been more than 8, maybe 9. But there was a frailty in her steps, like each one cost her more effort than it should. Then, in a voice soft as the rain itself, she spoke. "If you carry me up the stairs, I'll tell you a secret." Jack froze, the keys dangling from his hand. He'd heard plenty of strange things in his years, customers making wild excuses, drunks muttering nonsense near his shop, but this was different. The words landed heavy, as if they carried weight far beyond her small frame. He frowned. "What stairs?" The girl lifted a weak hand and pointed toward the old brick apartments across the street, their windows glowing faintly yellow through the rain. The building looked tired, like it had seen too many winters. Jack shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't in the business of carrying strange children up strange staircases. But there was something in her eyes, an odd mixture of exhaustion and quiet desperation, that rooted him in place. "Where's your folks?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "My mama's inside. But she can't carry me anymore," the girl whispered, her breath fogging in the cold air. "You look strong enough." Jack glanced at the apartments again. Something about the way she said it, it wasn't a demand, it wasn't even quite a plea. It was, trust. The mechanic rubbed his jaw, cursing under his breath. He didn't know this kid. He didn't owe her anything. And yet, his boots splashed through the rain as he crossed the street. "All right," he muttered, crouching down. "Up you go." The girl's tiny arms wrapped around his neck. She weighed almost nothing, like lifting a bundle of twigs. But as he rose with her, he felt the faint rattle of her breath against his collar. She was sick. Sick in a way that went deeper than a winter cold. They reached the building. The stairwell smelled faintly of damp plaster and dust, the overhead light flickering with a tired hum. "Which floor?" Jack asked. "Second," she whispered, pressing her head against his shoulder as though even speaking cost her strength. Jack started climbing. With each step, he felt an unfamiliar ache, not in his legs, but somewhere deeper, somewhere in the part of him he'd walled off for years. He hadn't carried anyone like this since. He shoved the thought away. By the time they reached the landing, Jack was breathing heavier than he cared to admit. Not because of the weight, she was feather light, but because of the memories clawing at him. "Which one's yours?" he asked, adjusting his hold. She pointed weakly at the door with peeling paint and the number 204 hanging crooked. Jack knocked. After a pause, the door creaked open. A woman stood there, thin, with tired eyes that widened at the sight of him carrying her daughter. "Lily?" the woman gasped, rushing forward. "Oh, sweetheart." The girl stirred in Jack's arms, managing a faint smile. "Mama, this man helped me." The woman looked at Jack, gratitude flooding her weary face. "Thank you. She shouldn't be out in the rain like that. I turned my back for one moment and..." Jack cleared his throat awkwardly, shifting the girl into her mother's arms. "No problem. Just, maybe keep her inside, yeah?" The apartment smelled faintly of boiled potatoes and damp wood. The moment Jack stepped inside, he realized just how different this world was from his own. His garage, cluttered as it was, still felt alive, tools clinking, radios humming, engines roaring. But this place, it felt hollow, stripped bare by years of weariness. The wallpaper peeled in yellowed strips, the carpet was threadbare, and a single lamp flickered on the corner table, throwing shadows that seemed too large for the small room. Sarah, Lily's mother, set her daughter gently on a faded couch. She was shaking, more from relief than exhaustion, but Jack could see the tremor in her hands as she brushed the wet hair from Lily's forehead. "Baby, you can't be outside in this weather," Sarah whispered, her voice tight with worry. "You know what the doctor said." Lily gave her mother a fragile smile. "I just wanted some fresh air." "Fresh air, yes. Cold rain, no." Sarah kissed her daughter's temple, then turned to Jack. For the first time since he entered, their eyes met. Hers were pale blue, ringed with fatigue, but there was a quiet dignity in them. "You didn't have to bring her all the way up," she said softly. "But thank you. Truly." Jack shifted uncomfortably, shrugging out of his damp jacket. "She asked. Figured I couldn't say no to that kind of request." Sarah's lips curved into something like a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "She has a way of getting what she wants. Always has." Jack nodded but said nothing. His eyes drifted back to Lily. The girl was curled up now, her small body wrapped in a blanket that had seen better days. Even so, she looked content, like she trusted the walls of this tired little apartment to protect her from the storm outside. But Jack's chest tightened. She was far too pale, far too thin. And the way her breaths rattled faintly in her chest, he knew sickness when he saw it. "Does she have a condition?" he asked carefully, his voice lower than before. Sarah hesitated. Her gaze lingered on her daughter before she replied, "She gets sick often. The doctors, they don't have many answers. It's complicated." Jack studied her face. She wasn't lying, but she wasn't telling the whole truth either. He didn't press. Instead, his eyes wandered the room. On the shelf were a few children's books, their spines cracked from rereading. A chipped teacup sat by the lamp. Beside the couch, a pair of shoes too small for Sarah to wear sat neatly aligned, Lily's. The kind of details that told a story without words. "Do you live here alone? Just the two of you?" Jack finally asked. Sarah stiffened. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, with a faint exhale, she said, "Yes. Just us." There was a silence that settled after her words, thick, almost uncomfortable. Jack didn't know why, but something in him stirred with recognition. That emptiness in her tone, the quiet way she said "just us." He knew it. He lived with it. Lily, still curled up, suddenly spoke, breaking the tension. "Mama, do you know what he did?" Sarah looked at her. "What, sweetheart?" "He carried me up the stairs." Lily's voice was proud, almost triumphant. "I told him I'd give him a secret for that." Sarah chuckled faintly, brushing her daughter's damp hair back. "And did you?" "Not yet," Lily whispered, her eyes flicking toward Jack. For reasons he couldn't name, the mechanic's stomach twisted. That same heaviness he'd felt when she first spoke to him outside returned, stronger now. Sarah rose then, moving toward the small kitchenette. "Would you like some tea?" "It's not much, but..." Jack shook his head quickly. No, thanks. I should get going. Just wanted to make sure she got in safe. Sarah gave him a grateful nod. You've done more than enough. He turned to leave, pulling his damp jacket back on. But as his hand touched the doorknob, a faint voice stopped him. Mr. Mechanic? He turned. Lily's head was resting against the couch cushion, her eyes barely open, but her voice carried through the room with quiet strength. Don't forget. I still owe you a secret. Jack swallowed hard. For the briefest moment, he thought about asking right then, demanding to know what this frail little girl could possibly hold back as a secret. But something in her tone, something in the way her small smile tugged at her lips, kept him silent. Instead, he gave a small nod and stepped into the hallway. The door closed softly behind him, but the echo of her words followed him down the flickering stairwell and out into the rain. And for the first time in years, Jack Miller felt like the ghosts of his past weren't the only ones chasing him home. The storm had passed by morning, leaving behind streets that glittered with puddles and the faint smell of wet earth. Jack Miller sat hunched over his kitchen table, staring into a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, Lily, standing under that street lamp, her voice cutting through the rain. If you carry me up the stairs, I'll tell you a secret. He shook his head, trying to chase the memory away, but it clung stubbornly. There was something about that girl, her eyes, her frailty, the strange weight in her words, that gnawed at him. Jack had carried plenty of things in his life, engines, tires, transmissions heavy as stone. But never had something so light felt so heavy in his arms. By noon, the garage was alive again, tools clanging, engines coughing to life. Jack threw himself into work, hoping grease and sweat would scrub the memory clean. But it didn't. Every time he looked at the smudge of oil on his hands, he remembered Lily's thin fingers gripping his collar, her head resting against his shoulder like she trusted him, a stranger, with her whole being. Jack? The voice pulled him out of his thoughts. It was Mrs. Coleman, one of his regulars, standing at the bay door with her usual grocery bags in hand. You all right? You look pale. Jack forced a grunt of acknowledgement, fixing his eyes on the engine block before him. Fine. Just a long night. But as the day dragged on, he realized something strange. Fine didn't feel like an option anymore. That evening, almost against his own will, Jack found himself walking the same route as the night before. Past the diner. Past the grocery. Right up to the tired brick apartments where he had carried Lily. He told himself he was just out for air. But when he reached the familiar stairwell, his chest tightened. He almost turned back, until the door to 204 creaked open. Sarah stepped out, a laundry basket balanced on her hip. Her face lit with surprise. Mr. Miller. Jack scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. Evenin'. I, was just walking by. Her eyes softened, though tiredness still weighed in them. Would you like to come in? Lily hasn't stopped talking about you. For reasons he couldn't quite name, Jack nodded. Inside, Lily sat cross-legged on the couch, a blanket around her shoulders and a book in her lap. Her face brightened the moment she saw him. You came back, she exclaimed, her voice weak but full of delight. Jack shifted, suddenly feeling too large for the small living room. Didn't plan on it. Just passing through. Lily giggled, covering her mouth with her thin hand. You're a terrible liar. Sarah set down the laundry basket, chuckling faintly. She's right. Lily has a way of seeing through people. Jack frowned, unsettled by the accuracy of the child's gaze. Is that so? Lily nodded eagerly. Then, after a pause, her voice dropped softer. I know your pain. The words hit like a wrench slipping from greasy fingers. Jack blinked. What did you just say? I see it, Lily whispered, her eyes never leaving his. In your scars. In the way you look when you think no one's watching. You carry something heavy. Something you don't talk about. Jack's throat tightened. He wanted to brush it off, laugh it away, but her words pierced too cleanly. He looked at his hands, at the faded burn scars, the rough calluses. He thought of another hand, much smaller, that he hadn't held in years. Sarah's brow furrowed, glancing between them. "Lily, sweetheart." But the girl continued, her small voice trembling with both fragility and certainty. "It's okay, Mr. Miller. Secrets don't always stay secrets forever." Jack swallowed hard, a lump forming in his chest. He hadn't spoken of it in years, not since that day, not since the hospital, not since the world went silent. And yet, somehow, this frail little girl, this stranger, had seen through him. The evening slipped on in quiet. Sarah busied herself with dinner, the clatter of pots filling the silence. Lily drifted in and out of sleep on the couch, her book slipping from her hands. Jack sat rigid in the corner, staring at the flickering lamplight. He had come here thinking maybe he could ease his own restlessness. Instead, he left with something heavier pressing against his chest. When he finally stood to leave, Sarah walked him to the door. "She doesn't usually open up to people like that. You must have made quite the impression." Jack shook his head, his voice low. "Feels more like she made one on me." Sarah gave a tired smile. "That's Lily. She has a way of making people remember what matters." Jack didn't answer. He stepped into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind him. But Lily's words followed him down the stairs, echoing louder than the creak of each step. "I know your pain." And for the first time in years, Jack Miller wasn't sure how much longer he could keep his own secret buried. Jack Miller had never been a man to dwell on the past. At least, that's what he told himself. In truth, his past had been welded into him like the steel frames he worked on every day, too deep to cut away, too solid to ignore. That night, as he sat alone in his kitchen, the silence pressed against him like a weight. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. And in between those sounds, he swore he could still hear it, the laughter of a child he had once called his own. Her name had been Emily. Jack's chest tightened just thinking it. His little girl. 8 years old, with hair the color of autumn leaves and a smile that could melt away the hardest day at the garage. Emily had been his world, until the day his world fell apart. He remembered it with painful clarity. The staircase had been steep. He'd carried her in his arms, laughing, wiggling, pretending to be asleep as he whispered, "Hold still, kiddo, you're getting heavy." But he'd missed a step. Just one. He had slipped. The fall hadn't seemed bad at first. Just a stumble, a jolt, the sound of her cry echoing through the narrow hallway. But hours later, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and sorrow, Jack's life shattered. A hidden injury, the doctor had said. Nothing anyone could have predicted. Nothing anyone could fix. Emily never came home. Jack never forgave himself. For years afterward, he buried himself in work. Grease under his nails, sweat on his back, nights spent with engines that didn't ask him to explain the hollowness in his chest. People whispered, "Poor Jack, lost his little girl, couldn't save her," but no one said what he screamed at himself every night: "You dropped her. You failed her." Now, sitting in his darkened kitchen, Jack pressed the heels of his hands to his eyes. He hadn't spoken her name aloud in years. Not to anyone. Not even to himself. And yet, that little girl in apartment 204, Lily, had looked at him with those wide, unblinking eyes and whispered, "I know your pain." It rattled him. How could she know? How could a child who barely knew him see straight through the armor he'd spent years building? The next evening, Jack found himself walking toward the apartments again, as though pulled by some invisible thread. He told himself it was coincidence, that he was just out for air, but his heart knew better. When Sarah opened the door this time, she smiled faintly. "She's been waiting for you." Inside, Lily sat propped on the couch, a quilt tucked around her shoulders. She looked even paler than before, but her eyes lit up the moment they met his. "You came back," she whispered. Jack gave a small shrug. "Guess I did." Lily patted the space beside her. Sit. He hesitated, then lowered himself onto the couch. She studied him with that same unnerving gaze, like she was peeling away the layers he had tried so hard to hide. You've been carrying something heavy, she said softly. Like a box that never gets lighter. Jack's throat tightened. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His instinct was to shut her down, to tell her she was just a kid, that she didn't understand. But somehow, he couldn't. Her name was Emily, he finally whispered, the words scraping out like rusted bolts loosening for the first time in years. Sarah, who was folding laundry at the table, froze. Her eyes flicked to him, wide with surprise, but she didn't interrupt. Jack's voice shook as he continued. My little girl. I dropped her. Just one step, just one mistake. And I've been carrying that ever since. Silence filled the room. The weight of his confession seemed to settle over all three of them. Then Lily's small hand reached out, trembling, and rested on his rough, scarred knuckles. It wasn't your fault, she whispered. Jack's head bowed, a tear slipping free despite his attempt to hold it back. I should have saved her. I should have. No, Lily interrupted softly, her eyes shining with quiet strength. Sometimes things happen that no one can stop. Even the strongest person in the world can't stop everything. You loved her, that's what matters. Love doesn't fall downstairs. Her words hit him harder than any wrench to the chest. For the first time in years, Jack felt something shift inside him. Not the disappearance of pain, no, that would never go away, but the faintest flicker of something else. A spark. A whisper of release. Sarah wiped her eyes quietly with the corner of a dish towel, her gaze soft and full of something Jack hadn't seen directed at him in a long time, compassion. In that moment, Jack realized something he hadn't dared admit. He hadn't just carried Lily up the stairs that night. She was beginning to carry him, too. The days began to follow an odd rhythm. Jack would work at the garage by day, but as evening settled and the streets grew quiet, he found his boots carrying him to the same weary brick building. To 204. It wasn't duty that pulled him. It was something deeper. A pull he couldn't name. Sarah never questioned his visits. She seemed almost relieved when he appeared, as if his presence eased the weight she carried alone. Sometimes she made tea, sometimes they sat in silence, but always, Lily was waiting, her eyes bright despite the sickness that clung to her small frame. One evening, Jack found her by the window, curled beneath a quilt. Outside, snow had begun to fall, blanketing the streets in white. The world looked peaceful. But Lily's pale face, pressed against the glass, told another story. Do you like the snow? Jack asked, easing into the chair beside her. Lily's lips curved into a small smile. I love it. It makes everything look clean. Like the world gets a second chance. Jack nodded, staring out at the drifting flakes. Yeah. I suppose it does. She turned her gaze back to him then, her expression suddenly serious. Mr. Miller? Yeah? Her small hand tugged at the edge of the quilt. I think it's time I tell you, a little piece of my secret. Jack felt his chest tighten. He leaned forward, bracing himself. I'm not sick the way Mama tells people, Lily whispered, her voice so faint he had to lean closer to hear. It's not just colds or weakness. It's something deeper. Something that's been inside me for a long time. Jack frowned, his rough hands tightening on his knees. What do you mean? She shook her head, coughing softly before continuing. The doctors don't have a name for it that I understand. But I know. I can feel it. She paused, her eyes glistening. I don't have much time. The words hung in the air like frost. Jack's throat tightened. Don't say that. Kid your age, you've got all the time in the world. But Lily only gave him a knowing look. You don't believe that? Not really. You know what it's like when someone runs out of time too soon. Jack hesitated, his throat dry. He had spent years running from ghosts, from the weight of loss. But here was this fragile child, asking him for the one thing he'd denied everyone else, to stay. Finally, he nodded. I promise. Lily's lips curved into the faintest smile, her eyes closing as she sank back against her pillow. Good. Then when the time comes, you'll know why I chose you. Her words sent a shiver down Jack's spine. He had no idea what secret this small, sick girl carried. But he knew one thing, his life would never be the same once she told it. The snow outside thickened over the next few days, wrapping the little town in a quiet hush. Jack's garage was slower now, few folks wanted to come out in the cold. Yet even when work trickled in, his mind wasn't on engines or tools anymore. It was on her, the fragile girl in apartment 204, and the secret she held like a lantern she wasn't ready to lift. Every evening, without fail, Jack returned. He tried to tell himself it was just kindness, just neighborly duty. But he knew better. Lily had stirred something in him, something he had buried the day Emily was lowered into the ground. That night, he knocked softly on Sarah's door. She opened it with the faintest smile, as if she had been expecting him all along. She's been asking for you, Sarah whispered, stepping aside. Jack's boots thudded softly on the worn floorboards as he walked to Lily's room. She was propped up on pillows, her face pale, but her eyes still carried that brightness he couldn't explain. Mr. Miller, she said softly, her voice raspy but warm, you came. Of course, he replied, pulling up the old wooden chair. Didn't I promise? Her lips curved into a small smile. Yes. And promises are important. Daddy used to say a man is only as good as his word. The word daddy hung heavy in the room. Jack glanced at Sarah, who stood silently by the door, her hands gripping the frame as if holding herself steady. Lily, Jack said carefully, you said you had more to tell me. About your secret. She nodded slowly, but it's not just mine. It belongs to Mama too. That's why she's scared to say it out loud. But I can't keep it in anymore. Not if I don't have much time. Sarah's face tightened much, and she shook her head slightly. Lily, please, but Lily lifted her small hand, silencing her mother with surprising strength. No, Mama. He needs to know. That's why he's here. That's why he was sent. Jack frowned, his chest tightening. Sent? By who? Lily's gaze met his, unblinking. By God. Or maybe by Emily. The name hit him like a punch. His heart thudded painfully in his chest. What did you just say? Emily, Lily repeated softly. Your little girl. The one you miss every single day. Jack froze. His hands gripped the chair so tightly the wood creaked. He hadn't spoken that name in years, not to anyone. How could Lily know? His eyes darted to Sarah, but she looked just as stunned, her face drained of color. Jack's voice was hoarse. Who told you that? No one, Lily whispered. I just know. The way I know I don't have much time. Sometimes when I dream, she comes to me. A little girl with golden hair. She holds my hand. She tells me not to be afraid. She says, Lily's breath hitched as she tried to fight back a cough. She says you'll understand. Jack's heart hammered, his mind reeling. Emily. His Emily. Golden hair, laughing eyes. The daughter he lost. He rose from the chair, pacing the small room, struggling to breathe. This doesn't make sense. Lily watched him with calm eyes that seemed far older than her years. It doesn't have to make sense. It just has to be true. Jack stopped, turning back to her. Why me? Why tell me? Because, Lily whispered, her small voice breaking, my secret isn't just about being sick. It's about where I came from, and who my father was. Sarah's sharp intake of breath filled the silence. Lily, no. But Lily pressed on, her eyes never leaving Jack's. Mama never told anyone. She wanted to protect me. But I need you to know. My daddy, he's gone now. But before he died, he worked at a garage too. He used to say his best friend was named Jack. Jack's blood ran cold. No, he muttered, shaking his head. Lily's lips trembled into the faintest smile. Mr. Miller, you weren't just meant to help us. You already belonged to us. You knew my daddy. Jack's knees nearly buckled. Memories flooded his mind, long nights at the garage, laughter shared, secrets told. His old friend, gone too soon. And now, this little girl. This fragile child with Emily's words on her lips, was his friend's daughter. The weight of it crashed over him, leaving him trembling, unable to speak. Jack's world tilted beneath him. The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy, suffocating, impossible to ignore. Lily, with her frail body and trembling hands, stared at him with eyes that seemed to see straight through his scars. You knew my daddy, she said again, her voice no louder than a whisper. Jack's mouth was dry. His hand shook as he lowered himself back onto the chair, staring at her as if she were a ghost. His voice cracked. He swallowed hard. Who was your father, Lily? She coughed, a soft rattling sound that broke Sarah's heart. Sarah rushed forward, pressing a glass of water to her lips. Lily drank slowly, then lifted her head again, her words fragile but steady. His name was Daniel. The name struck Jack like thunder. His chest tightened, his breath coming shallow. Daniel Brooks? Lily's face lit faintly, though her cheeks were pale. Yes, that's him. You did know him. Jack's hands gripped his knees, knuckles white. Memories roared back, the oil-stained garage, late nights fixing engines, Daniel's booming laugh echoing off the concrete walls. He remembered their dreams of opening a bigger shop together someday, their whispered talks about family, and the way Daniel had always carried hope like a torch. Daniel had been more than a friend. He had been a brother. And he was gone. Jack dropped his face into his hands, his voice rough and broken. Daniel. Oh God, Daniel. Sarah's lips trembled. He never told me much about you. Just your name. Just that if anything ever happened, he wished Lily could meet you. Jack's head snapped up, his eyes wild. What? Sarah nodded, tears spilling freely now. On the night before he passed, he made me promise. He said, if Lily ever needs someone, find Jack Miller. He'll know what to do. He'll carry her when I can't. The words shattered what was left of Jack's defenses. He doubled over, a sob tearing from his chest. The weight of it all, the loss of Daniel, the ghost of Emily, the fragile girl before him, it was too much. Lily reached out her tiny hand, her voice quivering but certain. That's why I asked you, Mr. Miller. To carry me up the stairs. Because I knew, you'd carry more than me. You'd carry my secret. You'd carry what Daddy left behind. Jack took her hand in both of his tears falling freely. Lily, you should never have to carry this alone. Her little fingers curled weakly around his. I don't. Not anymore. Because now you know. And I can tell you the rest. Jack's heart pounded. The rest? She nodded, her chest rising and falling with effort. Before he died, Daddy told me something. He said the sickness might take me, but not to be afraid. Because I had a protector. He said you would come. He said you'd understand the pain of losing a child, and that would make you strong enough to fight for me. Jack closed his eyes, his whole body trembling. It was as if Daniel's voice echoed across the years, across the grave, binding them together. Sarah was crying silently now, her hand pressed to her mouth, as if hearing the promise for the first time herself. Jack leaned closer to Lily, his voice breaking but steadying with every word. I swear to you, Lily. I'll fight for you. I'll carry you as far as you need. I won't fail Daniel. I won't fail you. Lily's lips curved into the faintest, most fragile smile. Then I can tell you my biggest secret of all. Jack's heart thudded. What is it? Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment, her breath shallow. Then she whispered, "I'm not afraid to die anymore, because Emily told me you'd be there to carry me home." The room went still. Silent, except for the sound of 3 broken hearts beating as one. Jack bent forward, pressing his forehead against her tiny hand, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. For the first time in years, he prayed. The winter wind rattled against the old wooden house as Jack sat by Lily's bedside. The machines hummed softly, Sarah close on the other side, her hand never leaving her daughter's. Lily had grown weaker in the past few days. Each breath was shallow, each smile fainter. Yet, her eyes, those wide, soul-deep eyes, still held a light that neither sickness nor sorrow could dim. Jack had spent every moment he could with her. Reading stories, carrying her up the stairs whenever she asked, and whispering promises that he would never abandon her. Somewhere along the way, the old mechanic who had lived in the shadows of grief found himself laughing again, even if only for her sake. And Lily noticed. "See," she whispered one night, her voice like the rustle of leaves. "Daddy was right. You're strong because you were broken." Jack blinked back tears, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "I was only broken until I met you." Sarah swallowed hard, her heart aching as she listened. She had seen the change in Jack too, how Lily's innocence had dragged him from the pit of despair. And though fear lingered, she was grateful beyond words that her daughter had someone to love her this deeply. But the day came when the doctor's eyes carried the truth they had been dreading. He spoke gently, but the meaning was sharp as glass. "It may be time to say your goodbyes." The world tilted. Sarah broke, clinging to Lily as if her arms alone could keep her tethered to life. Jack's chest heaved with silent rage at the unfairness of it all. He wanted to fight, to wrench time back with his bare hands. But Lily, ever the smallest and yet the strongest, smiled. "Don't cry," she whispered, looking between them. "This isn't goodbye. Daddy told me, and Emily told me too. It's just carrying me home." Her tiny hand reached for Jack's. "Will you do it? Will you carry me one last time?" His throat tightened. His vision blurred. But he nodded, his voice breaking. "Always, Lily. Always." He lifted her gently into his arms, feeling the fragile weight of her body against his chest. Sarah walked beside him, tears falling silently, as he carried Lily up the staircase she had once begged him to climb. At the top, where the window spilled golden light across the floor, Lily rested her head against his shoulder. Her breathing slowed, her fingers relaxed. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice barely a breath. "For keeping Daddy's promise. For carrying me." And with that, she slipped away, as gently as a feather carried off by the wind. Sarah's cry pierced the silence. Jack sank to his knees, cradling Lily close, his tears soaking her hair. But even in the agony of loss, there was something else, something quiet, steady, unshakable. Peace. Because Lily's secret had not just been about death. It had been about love, the kind that binds souls across generations, across losses, across the unbearable weight of goodbye. And in that moment, Jack understood what Daniel had meant all along. He hadn't just been asked to carry a little girl. He had been asked to carry hope. Months later, the house was quieter, yet not empty. Sarah still set an extra plate at the table sometimes, her heart refusing to forget. Jack still found himself staring at the staircase, remembering the weight of her in his arms. But they had each other now. The broken mechanic and the grieving mother, both carried by the love of a little girl who had been too fragile for this world, yet strong enough to heal 2 shattered hearts. On a warm spring evening, Sarah found Jack in the garage, staring at an old photograph of Daniel. "She saved us, didn't she?" Sarah whispered. Jack nodded, his jaw trembling. "She carried us, just as much as we carried her." And for the first time in years, Jack allowed himself a smile. Not the forced one he used to wear for the world, but a real one, gentle, wounded, and alive. Because though Lily was gone, her secret remained. Love doesn't end. It carries you. Always.